Reporting.
Thanks so much, Danielle. In other medical news, imagine if you were hospitalized for a heart attack or a stroke, and once you were sent home, there wasn't anyone there to help care for you. Well, a few counties across our region have implemented community paramedicine programs. As Carolina Impact's Jeff Rivenbark explains, these programs not only benefit recovering patients, but save taxpayers money.
Flashing lights, sirens, and speeding ambulances. When you see this, it usually means someone's in trouble. Paramedic Ann Coffey responds to people in need, but she's not in an ambulance. And a typical day for her...
It kind of depends on how many patients need to be seen that day. I'll be sent faxes from the hospital, and they might communicate with me a little bit about that patient beforehand.
As a community paramedic for Cabarrus County EMS, Coffey visits discharged hospital patients
The 24th Psalm.
like Henry Crowder.
The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein.
Earlier this year, he suffered 3 strokes, but now he's much stronger and enjoys quiet time at home reading his Bible.
Into the hills of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place. If I don't read but just 2 or 3 verses of it, it means a lot.
Another thing that brings him joy is when Ann stops by to check in on him.
Hey, Henry.
After a bit of small talk,
You taking all your medicines like you're supposed to?
she gets down to business,
Okay, tell me about this one.
followed by
Is it
a blood pressure check. At 74, Henry lives alone with little family contact. That's why her visits mean so much.
Because, you know, a lot of people ain't got time for you. She's so kind, she's so wonderful. It makes you feel good to have someone to talk to.
Blood pressure's looking good. It was 138/80.
Well, that's good.
About the only thing Henry dreads,
Oh boy.
getting his finger pricked for a diabetes blood sugar test. And within seconds,
95, good deal.
he gets a good report.
We try to get to the patient before they have an emergency and make sure that they understand all the things they need to do to keep themselves healthy to prevent something like a heart attack, stroke, or accidents.
When Henry was released from the hospital after his first stroke, he got a little confused about taking his medications.
It kind of became more of a regular thing to come and check on him and make sure he was doing the things he needed to do.
The compassion piece is paramount with what we do.
As a supervisor for Cabarrus County EMS, Captain Justin Bryan says community paramedics have responded to about 400 house calls since the program started in September 2015.
Sometimes they sit and listen to folks talk for an hour and they really don't have a solution, but they've listened.
Paramedics work closely with Carolina's healthcare system Northeast and Concord.
Without their referrals and without the integration there, the program would not be as successful as it is.
While nurses typically call discharged hospital patients, sometimes it can be hard to tell how well they're doing or what they need.
Our stroke navigator, which is a stroke certified nurse, calls the patients after they've been discharged. And often during that phone call, she would say, you know, they sound okay, they tell me they're taking their medicines the right way, but something just doesn't feel right. If we only had a set of eyes.
That's where community paramedics make a difference. From 2014 to 2015, stroke readmissions at CHS Northeast increased by 13%. Since the program started last year, there's been a 24% decrease, not to mention easing some of the financial burden on the healthcare system.
Our goal is to keep them out of the hospital, the cost savings to the patient, as well as the fact that we're not tying up a hospital bed or an ER bed for hours, even days at a time.
Here's another cost savings.
By having dedicated personnel who can go out and do these home visits, we're able to reduce the number of 911 calls for frequent users.
Every trip a community paramedic makes to someone's home prevents racking up unnecessary miles on ambulances, which can cost more than $160,000 to replace.
That provides our paramedic trucks their availability to be able to respond to emergency calls.
The community paramedic program cost about $131,000 annually, but most funding so far has come from the Cannon Foundation and CHS Northeast. In addition to Cabarrus County, Mecklenburg, Lincoln, Rowan, and Cleveland counties have some kind of community paramedicine program in place, as well as 15 other counties across the state. As for Henry, knowing someone like Ann cares about his recovery,
it means a lot to me. It means a lot.
He's very special to me too. I'm really thankful that this program has brought me back to the level of being able to really communicate with patients and talk to them and have that level of care with them. To see him being able to take care of himself and do things on his own, it's huge. I mean, because ultimately that's what you want. You want people to be back to that level where they don't need to be taken care of.
Despite all he's been through this year, Henry feels better knowing it won't be long before a community paramedic shows up to make sure he's okay. For Carolina Impact, I'm Jeff Rivenbark reporting.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Joining me now is Captain Will Cannon with Cabarrus County EMS. Captain Cannon, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate all that you do to help our community.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to us a little bit. What is the difference between community paramedic and the EMS response?
Community paramedic provides us the opportunity to be proactive. So typically when someone is suffering a medical emergency, they dial 911. We send an ambulance to respond to handle their acute medical need. The community paramedic program allows us to respond to assist the individual before there's an emergency.
So, but it's after some sort of, they've had a medical issue and there's some ongoing maintenance that is needed?
Yes, ma'am. Oftentimes we see these patients as referrals from CHS Northeast. It could be either a post-stroke patient, a post-coronary artery bypass graft surgical patient, or a COPD patient. However, we also see patients that were not post-discharge patients that we have identified have unmet needs throughout many of our various avenues to determine that that patient needs some additional assistance.
It may be situations like diabetics and people who have ongoing acute issues.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Help us understand what the cost savings is, because it probably prevents a lot of people from having to go to the emergency room.
Yes, ma'am. So a main thrust of this program is to reduce readmissions to the hospital. So our community paramedics will be able to come in and fill in a gap between when that patient is discharged from the hospital until that they are fully on their way to recovery. Additionally, it provides us an opportunity to see patients who regularly call 911 for various medical emergencies to proactively fix a problem before it becomes an emergency.
You know, we saw it in the story that Jeff had earlier. What a beautiful thing for a lot of these older in-home people who may not have anyone at home to even help them to go through the process of continued care for them. You develop relationships with these people as well, don't you?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Absolutely. In many ways, our community paramedics are a lifeline for people with very little support systems.
And how long has this been going on, and are we able to expand it?
Yes, ma'am. We have been doing this program for roughly a year and a half, and we do hope to expand it in the future with additional community paramedics so we can see more patients.
About how many folks are you able to see in a year?
So we see around 250 patients, and we hope to grow that number each year.
So this is kind of like the old-fashioned doctor who makes house calls.
Very much so. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
So what's old is new again.
Yes, ma'am.
What an interesting concept, and how that feeling of support and providing something very different and very unique, and to have the cost savings that probably is a savings to the public as well.
Absolutely. The main thrust of the program is to encourage an environment of healing in the home. And anything that we can do to proactively meet the needs, both medically, psychologically, emotionally, to assist our patients in Cabarrus County to stay healthy and happy and to have a good quality of life is the true impetus for the program.
Are you familiar, is this happening in other parts of our state?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Community paramedicine in general is a relatively new concept in emergency medical services. About a fifth of the counties in North Carolina have active community paramedic programs now, with many more in developmental stages.
If people in your county are interested in just becoming aware of it now, is there a number that they can call to possibly be included in the program?
Yes, ma'am. We do have a specialty services supervisor who fields calls, and we have a special line for community paramedic interest.
Captain Cannon, help us understand, what is the one thing that you want people to understand about this program before we run out of time?
Yes, ma'am. The one thing that we want people to understand about the community paramedic program is that we are here to be the patient advocate, to be collaborative, to help meet unmet needs, to help connect our citizens with the resources in their community, and to truly foster the ability for the individuals to be healthy in their homes and remain independent, healthy, and happy.
Another great resource throughout our region. Captain Will Cannon from the Cabarrus County EMS, thank you so much for bringing this story to us. We appreciate all that you do.
Thank you very much.
Well, I didn't